All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. So we're going to be talking today about approach notes and enclosures, but I'm going to get us started by playing a little bit of confirmation and then talking about how I'm playing some of these enclosures and how I practice them. And make sure that you're asking questions in the chat. I can see the chat and are more than happy to talk about what you guys are feeling for these approach notes and enclosures. So let's get going here. Sax and playback are out of sync. Let me know how bad it is. I apologize for that. I don't know if it's my Bluetooth headphones maybe that are causing that. But let me know. I'll keep an eye on the chat. But anyway, so this is my little contrafact on confirmation. It's got some fun Coltrane changes to it and some the regular confirmation changes. But thinking about approach tones and approach tones and enclosures is a lot about knowing your chord tones well enough to be able to play around them. That's basically what enclosures and approach tones are. We're just enclosing or approaching a chord tone, right? So a great exercise to do before we even get into our written exercises, just off the bat here, is to be able to play like a bass player would, right? And I talk about this a lot, and I've done a couple videos on this channel about how I practice standards and how I like to practice playing like a bass player, right? So I'm just gonna play down the middle, chord tones of confirmation, and I'll put the real confirmation up here. You know what? Let me put my microphone a little bit closer. Sorry about that. It's got a mind of its own. Whoop, come on. So I'm playing each one of these chord tones just as a bass player would. I'm trying to imitate the bass player, right? And so 1, 3, 5s, and 7s. And then adding approach tones or enclosures are just adding 1 half step below each chord tone. So you can have an approach tone to your blues, or sorry, your confirmation. So I'm just adding an approach tone per bar, or per bar per chord, right? So like F sharp goes to G. Even though it's a diatonic tone, it's an approaching to the root, right? And then F natural to F sharp, B flat to B, E flat to E, B flat to A, C sharp to D, F sharp to G, right? Just adding those little chromatic tones that are approaching my chords. You can do the same thing with enclosures, right? Or half step above, half step below chord tone. You know, you can do that for all your chords. You know, I'm just going up F sharp half diminished, right? So all of these different kinds of versions of playing these approach notes just by looking at a chord sheet, right, without writing anything down, just thinking about playing confirmation like a bass player would, adding some of these chromatic tones, right? So that's one example of this. Another one I want to talk about is in this resource that we have at Jazz Lesson Videos called Approach Note and Enclosure Phrase Workouts. And what's cool about this book is that it goes through all different chord qualities, so like major, dominant, minor, half diminished, altered, and it shows you short, medium, and long enclosure phrases. So it kind of gives you a head start to be able to do some of these exercises. So let's look at this one over C major. Right? So basically we're starting on C, right? Our root, we're using this as an approach tone to D, which is a diatonic tone, F to E, right? Diatonic enclosure there. Whole step below, half step above, chord tone. Then another one, diatonic tone to A, the 6th, and then half step above, half step below, target tone, right? So we have 2 target tones here, E and G. Everything else is trying to approach or enclose those. Right? Have you ever heard this phrase? Very famous Charlie Parker phrase, right? That's kind of an approach note or enclosure phrase too. We go up an arpeggio, and then up to the 7th, and then he plays chromatically down to the 5th. Right? So you can, you know, use that as a kind of a guideline to being able to play some of these lines and improvising, like play an arpeggio and then a bunch of enclosures to a chord tone. Maybe use this one. So I just played an arpeggio off of the G, the target tone. There we go. I just made a phrase, and all I'm thinking about is C major, right? Even though some of these notes aren't in C major, that's what I'm thinking about as I'm playing these exercises, is just C major. So here's another example. Let's go to a little bit more of a complicated one. Right? So again, same process. We're looking for our chord tones and where they're being targeted, right? So here we target a 9th degree of C, which is D. And then here we're targeting the root, and then here we're targeting the 3rd. Another great one, again, not even starting on a chord tone, but ending and targeting ones so that it sounds like the key of C. I remember when I was in early college years, and I was, playing tunes with lots of major chords, specifically ballads and whatnot, and man, I was like, what am I going to play? The C major scale sounds terrible, not terrible, but like boring. And I didn't know what else to play. And I was like, I can't really, chromatically sidestep on this major chord. It doesn't sound good. And then when I started taking more private lessons with guys like Chad and Jerry Bergonzi and stuff, it really opened my door up of thinking about C major as not just, but also being able to play it like, where I'm just adding and enclosing certain notes of the scale. Right? So you can, make your major chords sound a lot cooler, a lot better if you're just thinking about enclosing and approaching them chromatically, which is all this book is designed to do. Let's check out one on a minor chord here. These are all major. Let's do dominant first. That's the next thing in the book. Okay, cool. So here's some more short phrases. Let's look at this top one on the right. So we got our couple chord tones on big beats. We start on an F, that's not a chord tone, but we're targeting G onto the downbeat of 3. Then we're targeting B flat, our dominant 7, on the downbeat of the next bar, and then our third at the end. And all of these are separate enclosures that you can practice on your instrument. Right? And these all are really easy to just start implementing and improvising if you just think about C7 now as all of these different enclosures. Maybe played a diatonic arpeggio off of that last note, our target tone of E, kind of like Charlie Parker was doing. You ever do this? You ever heard of this one? Just playing like little gruppettos, I think they're called in classical music, or like little enclosures basically around each chord tone of a dominant or major scale. You can do that in all 12 keys. It's kind of a cool, thing to shift to, chromatically. And it adds into what we're talking about of being able to think about C7 and playing right? And I practiced, being able to play things from the exercises of a book like this, right? Where it's really about, seeing these chords and seeing the exercises of how we target things in and around a chord change, right? So that way, if I go to play confirmation, I'm going to try and add some of these enclosures into my playing here. And let me know if the backing track is off or on as far as my playing goes. don't know how many people are watching currently, but let me know if the backing track in my playing is on or off. And also, I'll say this, all the things I'm going over today, if you use the code Approach Stream 5, I'll link this in the description or in the chat. If you use Approach Stream 5, you get $5 off all of these books that I'm talking about. Little lag, things are resolving as they are supposed to. Okay, cool. Killing. Okay, yeah, so let me put that in the stream here, in the chat. Approach Stream 5, and you get $5 off at checkout, which is awesome. Cool. Alrighty, so let's move on to a different version of practicing this. We're going to look at another book. This one's called 15 Approach Note and Enclosure Exercises for Jazz Musicians. And these are more like technique and scale based, right? So thinking about playing your major scales or your chromatic scales or your melodic minor scales or anything like that as more of a, oh, it's out of sync? Dang. Okay, I'll have to figure that out. Sorry, I'm still new to the streaming land, but we're working with it. Hopefully, you know, you still can hear the things that I'm talking about, even if it's a little bit off. And we don't have to use iReal Pro the whole time. We can use some other pieces of software I can just play too. But thank you for the feedback. We appreciate it. Okay, so like I said, these are examples of being able to play approach notes and enclosures in a scalar format. So like a technique exercise, right? I'm a big fan of practicing two ways when I'm learning something. One, I have to put it on the saxophone, right? And then two, I have to be able to understand it to be able to improvise with it. And this is the technique part, the putting it on your saxophone or on your instrument, whatever you're playing. And the more efficient you are at playing it this way, the easier it will become to improvise with, right? All the patterns that I played when I was playing with iReal Pro, whether it was in sync or not, are all patterns that I've learned in this format, right? I learned them with scales and with transcriptions or exercises or etudes, you know. And here's a cool little tidbit, because you guys are on the stream hanging with me. I was a student of Chad Lefkowitz-Brown. I'm sure you guys have heard this before. And man, he was writing all of these books that he has, or, you know, I would say maybe like the first 40% of them in my lessons with me, which is really cool. So I was one of the first people to study this way and use these, you know, etude books and approach note exercise, all this stuff, all these technique things. And it's really cool. Now I'm a product of these books and of Chad's playing. So cool. Let's keep going. So okay, so we got our approach note exercise. So again, this one is going in C major, our C major scale. Right? And here is the first 4-note cell. So our approach note is C sharp in this case, the non-diatonic tone. Then our next, we have D sharp as our approach tone. D sharp again, because there's a half step in between, or there's a half step interval of E and F, so we have to create a different approach tone. That now becomes a whole step above. F sharp, right? There's our approach tone. G sharp. B flat. There we go. So here's the exercise played in full. Right, now going down, same thing. So we're learning how to approach each scale tone of our major scale now from above and below, ascending and descending. Again, doing this a little bit every day. Like, I like thinking about my warm-up when I go practice. It's like 15% of my time. So whatever amount of time that is, an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, whatever, 15% of that is going to be on technique exercises. This is a version of a technique exercise. So if I'm working on getting that sound of approach tones into my playing or enclosures, this is an exercise I'm going to do every day for like a week or two, first 15% of my practicing. And, you know, you don't have to play all the tough keys. You can play, you know, some that are easier, some that are hard. You know, I had a student the other day that was like, Ryan, I don't like practicing in D flat because none of the tunes that I play are ever in D flat. And I was like, okay, good point, right? But the more flexible you are in these other keys, the easier it is to play techniques that are outside of the key, like shifting tonalities and whatnot, adding different colors. Different scale qualities come from different, different chord qualities come from different scale qualities. So it's good to be as proficient in all your keys. I had a teacher in college that said you're only as good as your weakest key. So take that into consideration. And for example, let's go to a more difficult key here. Let's go to my least favorite is A flat. I always fail at A flats. So I'm gonna, probably not play this perfectly right off the bat because I still struggle with it. But what I like to do when I'm practicing these is just play up and down our major scale. So I know where my sharps and flats are. Try and do it full range. And then sometimes I'll read the exercise, but sometimes playing it by ear, not looking at it, is less confusing. Because reading the accidentals and knowing where your flats are sometimes is harder. But I'll go nice and slow. But playing that major scale first really helps me get this right off the bat, or an easier time getting it right off the bat. Now let's do descending. And the good thing about a major scale, most people know what a major scale sounds like. So if you mess up, boom, you'll know right away, right? Just like my eyeballs lit up when I kind of screwed up on that one part. So again, I'll do it again, nice and slow, not trying to rebuild Rome here, just trying to get better at A flat. Okay, that's a little bit faster, a little bit more proficient. I like to do each direction 3 times and then the whole exercise 3 times, right? Again, it takes, maximum 8 minutes to do that. Even if you're really slow on something, 8 to 10 minutes on one really difficult key will really help you, especially if you're consistent with it. Consistency beats quantity at always. Always. You want to come back to these things. We're training these muscles, our lungs, our brain, our ears, right? Those are all muscles that the more that we do things consistently, the easier it is to become proficient at it, right? So that's just one example of one of these. Let's go to a different one. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Number 5. Yeah, so this one goes kind of down below the range, but I'll play it up the octave anyway. So this is an approach tone scale exercise again, going through our 12 keys. This one has 1 approach tone per bar rather than 1 approach tone per cell or per 4 notes. Check this out. Man, this really reminds me of like the early 50s Coltrane stuff. He was super locked in to this kind of playing, like the very scalar with maybe 1 chromatic tone, that sort of language. To me, very 50s Coltrane, and it's really deep rooted in this exercise, right? So here's the descending version now. Oh, sorry. We'll do the last 2 again. See, we all make mistakes. I think it was because I was trying to read it and it goes down the octave and my brain was freaking out about that. Again, another good point. Don't worry about reading it all the time. Just worry about connecting it with your ears and hearing those major scale, tones and what you're targeting. So understanding the exercise is really great. Like, where's my approach tone? Where's my chromatic tone? What am I targeting in what measure, what part of the measure? And then being able to do it more by ear, right? So now I'm going to improvise again on confirmation, and I'm going to think more in the style of these exercises. So playing a little bit more diatonically and trying to approach each chord diatonically with these kind of scaly diatonic patterns. So I'll slow it down a little bit so you can hear it. Again, let me know about the delay. Sorry for those if it's hurting your ears. But we'll try it again. All right, hopefully that one was a little bit better with the delay. Cool. So yeah, just remember, if you're interested in these books, man, and like I said, I studied with Chad for 3 or 4 years straight, and I still practice these books. I mean, this was like years ago. I've known Chad now for 10 years. Yeah, I think the bulk of our lessons were like 2017 or 16 to like 2019 or 2020. And I'm still practicing all this stuff all the time, right? And even as executive director of Jazz Lesson Videos, I still practice these books. You know, I'm not just playing them for you guys, like still shedding, you know, these melodic cells, these approach tones, pentatonic shifting, all the stuff that we have. I'm still practicing all that stuff. Cool. Okay, so now let's go on to the third version of practicing these, the third formula, and this is now over a standard, right? So we've been playing confirmation this whole time. Let's move on to something a little bit more complicated harmonically. This is Stella by Starlight, or Bella by Moonlight, as named here for, I'm sure for like some kind of copyright purposes. So I'm going to minimize myself here a little bit. Sorry, that's my wedding in the background there on my screensaver. So if you see people cheering and blowing bubbles, it's from my wedding. There we go. Cool. Okay, so actually, maybe let's switch these around. Well, it's fine. You guys can see it, I'm sure. Okay, so let's start digesting some of this information here. So this is from a book called, it'll pop up here if I float over it. Come on. Oh yeah, 20 approach note etudes, right? So these are all etudes using these approach notes and enclosures that we've been talking about this whole live stream, right? So we're playing pretty much diatonically through these, except we're, you know, as far as our target tones go, but we are using a lot of the approach, chromatic approach tones, right? So here in this F sharp half diminished measure, lots of inside notes, A, B, C natural, E, G natural, flat 9 is sometimes played, but you know, you could consider that an approach note to A, F sharp, E, that's pretty much 100% diatonic. D sharp, F sharp, A, C natural is the flat 9, so it's diatonic. Now here's where our first chromatic approach tone comes. A, B flat, B, A, right? So that B flat is definitely an approach tone up to the root. Here we go, G, G flat or F sharp to F, that's an approach tone there. B flat to B, another approach tone there. F sharp, A, G, an enclosure. E flat to E, right? Anytime you see a half step to a chord tone, that would be where the approach tone is. And this is also a great training aid to analyze transcriptions, right? So transcriptions of your favorite players, when you're either reading them or doing them by ear, you know, if you're used to analyzing them from an etude book that's themed to something, you know, kind of flexing that part of your brain and flexing that muscle, it's easier to then be able to go and do it in a transcription like live or, you know, whenever you're practicing it. But, you know, just another kind of thing that you're shedding when you're using these books, right, is analyzing and, you know, what's being targeted where and why. So, you know, all these half steps, B flat or B natural to C, D flat, B natural, C, that's definitely a non-diatonic enclosure. E flat to D, F sharp to G, right? All these. So let me play a little bit of it for you, and I will, let me see. Okay. Also, please, if there's any questions, let me know. I'm super down to answer some specific questions about what we got going on here. So I'm just going to play this nice and slow without the play along for now, just so that it's not like out of sync and it, you know, kind of ruins what we're working on here. So. Sorry. Sorry, my window keeps getting cut off and I get mixed up here. I think next time I'll make the Etude book bigger and iReal Pro smaller. Okay, so just with those, right, you can hear where I'm coming, kind of standing outside or, enclosing some of the outside stuff and then coming back in. So now let's see if I can do this with the play line. I think if I do it a little slower, it might help the latency a bit. So I'm going to read some of his etude, and I'm also just going to improvise in the style of his etude, which is a great way of implementing new techniques into your playing, right? Being able to play in the style of whatever you're, approaching and learning, right? So again, part of his etude, part of my improvising, all trying to target enclosures, right, and approach tones. So you know what I'm saying? Like being able to play little parts of this, I like to take like little pieces of these phrases. Right, that was this measure here. Yeah. That's a great one to implement right away. So then I'll just practice like this many bars of Stella and just always play that on D minor, right? Check it out. So I octave displaced it one time, but on all the other ones, right, I made sure that I was playing that exact line right here every time I got to D minor, right? This is a great tool for not only learning approach tones, but also being able to learn them on, hold on one second. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just making sure all of my stuff is lined up here. Okay. That is just a way, to be able to implement language directly into your playing. I call this the application process. I use this with all different kinds of improvising techniques, whether it's playing approach tones and enclosures, or if it's learning a specific transcription line, or if it's learning a pentatonic shift, anything, right? I learn it on paper in context, and then I immediately start improvising with it and making my own lines around it, and then connecting the dots with the new piece of information, right? So again, you could do Stella by Starlight using some of those scale exercises that we did, right? So if I try that. that again. I'm going to start here one more time. Anyway, now I'm just having fun and improvising. But again, you know, themed improvising is kind of a hidden strategy of practicing, right? I'm just thinking about, after, you know, practicing my enclosures and approach tones with my scales, kind of in that technique mode, learning them over a progression, learning them over a chord change, then like just improvising for like a half hour or 45 minutes, just thinking about these, right? You know, not having a set pattern, not having a designated exercise to play, right? That's great. But also it's really good to just practice improvising with them, because when you go on stage or a jam session or whatever, and you go to play these, I mean, there's nothing in front of you. The only thing you got is this and this, right? Your mind and your ears. So to just have the mindset of playing approach notes and enclosures over Stella by Starlight or over whatever tune. Let's do Olio instead. Let's do rhythm changes. So I'm just going to play rhythm changes now, thinking about enclosures and cells. I'll slow it down just it's fine. Again, no set ways, no set exercise, just my mindset and my ears trying to guide me around these approach tones. So that's kind of the vibe, right? I love practicing in this style. I love being able to practice while improvising. I think I'm obsessed with improvising in this language. That's why I love playing this, you know, this music and being really, you know, a professional, right? You know, and pursuing that goal. So being able to practice in that way, feeling like I'm almost performing, is a really great way of learning new language. And I don't think it's talked about enough in the jazz academia world that we have to practice improvising. We have to practice playing, you know? We don't always have the opportunity to go on stage and just play, you know, with people. We got to do it with our backing tracks and stuff. Use these robots for for good, right? And a great way to do that is to just have a themed improvising session. You're just thinking about playing enclosures and approach tones over Olio or over whatever standard you're working on. Cool? Awesome. So those are your three ways. Practice them with a scale, practice them with a tonality or a chord involved, and then improvise with them and read an etude, get some inspiration, but then improvise with them. That's a really great way of getting them into your playing faster than, I guess, sooner than later is what I meant to say. Cool. So again, reminder, there's a link in the description for it, and there's also in the chat. If you use Approach Stream 5 at checkout, you get $5 off one of these PDF books. The PDF books we talked about were 15 approach note and enclosure exercises, approach note and approach note and enclosure phrase workouts, and then those 20 approach note and enclosure etudes. So if you're interested in checking those out, you can go to jazzlessonvideos.com. Again, there's a link in the description to check them out. If you want to study with me, I teach during Jazz Gym, this program that we have. It's a daily coaching session, kind of like a mentorship program where you get to talk with me, practice with me. I give you different topics every hour to practice. And it's really cool. And there's a great community. It keeps you accountable with practicing. It's a great way to get involved with people that are just trying to get better in practicing. So we have so much stuff going on in Jazz Lesson videos. Make sure you check out all that stuff on the website. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll see you guys in the next stream. Thanks for joining me. Woohoo!